Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of the swimming pool, her hands trembling as she adjusted her goggles one final time. The chlorine-scented air filled her lungs as hundreds of spectators watched from the bleachers above. At 19 years old, she had already broken 3 regional records, but today was different. Today, she was competing in the National Swimming Championships, representing her small coastal town of against swimmers from across the country. The weight of expectation pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. Her father, Captain Robert Mitchell, had been deployed overseas for 8 months, serving his 3rd tour of duty in Afghanistan. Before leaving, he had promised to watch her compete via whenever possible. Sarah touched the small anchor pendant around her neck, a gift from him before his deployment, and whispered a silent prayer. Her coach, Mrs. Henderson, approached with a warm smile that barely masked her own nervousness. "Remember what we practiced, Sarah. Long strokes, steady breathing, and trust your training." The older woman had been coaching competitive swimming for 25 years, but she had never had an athlete with Sarah's natural talent and determination. Sarah nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. She had trained for this moment for 3 years, waking up at 4:30 every morning to practice in the local community center pool. The facility was nothing compared to the Olympic standard pool she now stood beside, with its crystal-clear water and professional timing systems. Her small town had behind her, organizing fundraisers to pay for travel expenses and competition fees that her single mother could never afford on her nurse's salary. As the announcer called the swimmers to their marks, Sarah took her position on the starting block for the 400-meter freestyle. The other 7 competitors looked confident and composed, their sleek swimsuits bearing logos of prestigious swimming clubs and elite training academies. Sarah's suit was simple and unadorned, purchased with money saved from her part-time job at the local diner. The starting horn echoed through the natatorium, and Sarah dove into the water with perfect form. The cool liquid enveloped her body as she began her rhythmic stroke pattern. For the first 100 meters, she stayed in the middle of the pack, packing herself as her coach had instructed. The crowd's cheers became a distant murmur underwater, replaced by the sound of her own heartbeat and the splash of her movements. As she approached the halfway point, something extraordinary happened. Sarah felt a surge of energy unlike anything she had experienced before. Her strokes became more powerful, her breathing more efficient. She began passing swimmers one by one, her years of training in the modest community pool somehow giving her an edge over competitors who had trained in state-of-the-art facilities. With 100 meters remaining, Sarah was in 2nd place, just half a body length behind the defending national champion, Tours from California. The crowd was on their feet, sensing something special was about to happen. Mrs. Henderson stood at the pool's edge, shouting encouragement that Sarah couldn't hear but somehow felt in her heart. In the final 50 meters, Sarah found another gear. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "When things get tough, you don't give up. You dig deeper and find strength you didn't know you had." She pulled alongside, then slowly began to edge ahead. The 2 swimmers were stroke for stroke, their times identical on the digital display board. As they approached the final turn, Sarah executed a perfect flip turn that gained her a crucial few inches. The crowd was deafening now, many spectators jumping and screaming as they witnessed what appeared to be an impossible victory in the making. Sarah's lungs burned and her muscles screamed for relief, but she pushed forward with everything she had. The final 10 meters felt like an eternity. Sarah and were still neck and neck, their movements synchronized like a perfectly choreographed dance. But in those last few strokes, Sarah's years of grinding through early morning practices in a small-town pool paid off. She touched the wall a fraction of a second before the defending champion, her hand slapping the timing pad with a resounding splash. The pool deck erupted in chaos. Sarah emerged from the water, gasping and exhausted, and looked up at the scoreboard with disbelieving eyes. Her name appeared in 1st place, with a time that not only won the race but shattered the existing national record by nearly 2 seconds. The number seemed impossible, even to her. Mrs. Henderson was crying as she helped pull Sarah from the pool, wrapping her in a towel and embracing her with the fierce pride of someone who had watched a dream come true. Other swimmers congratulated Sarah with genuine smiles, recognizing they had witnessed something truly special. Even Tours, despite her disappointment, approached Sarah with gracious words of praise. As Sarah stood on the podium 30 minutes later, the gold medal heavy around her neck, she thought about her father watching from thousands of miles away. The national anthem played, and she sang along through tears of joy and exhaustion. This was the moment she had dreamed about since she was 12 years old, diving off the dock at Miller's Lake during family vacations. The medal ceremony concluded with photographs and interviews. Sarah, still dripping wet and wrapped in her town's flag that someone had brought to the competition, spoke to reporters about her unlikely journey from small-town pool to national champion. Her story quickly spread on social media, with videos of her record-breaking swim going viral within hours. That evening, as Sarah sat in her modest hotel room, the gold medal resting on the nightstand beside her bed, she received a video call from her father. Captain Mitchell appeared on her phone screen in his military uniform, his eyes red with tears of pride and joy. They talked for an hour about the race, her future plans, and how much they missed each other. Before ending the call, he promised he would be home soon and that they would celebrate properly. Sarah fell asleep that night clutching the anchor pendant, her medal gleaming in the moonlight streaming through the hotel window. She had no way of knowing that in less than 48 hours, her moment of triumph would turn into a nightmare that would test her character in ways no swimming pool ever could. The phone call came at 6:15 in the morning, jarring Sarah from the deepest sleep she had experienced in months. Her mother's voice was shaking, barely above a whisper, as she delivered news that would change everything. "Sarah, honey, there's been an accident. Your father's convoy hit an explosive device. He's alive, but he's badly injured and being airlifted to Germany for emergency surgery." Sarah sat up in bed, the hotel room spinning around her as the words sank in. The gold medal on her nightstand suddenly felt meaningless compared to the possibility of losing her father. She threw clothes into her bag with trembling hands, her coach arranging for an immediate flight home while hospital officials provided updates every few hours. Captain Mitchell had suffered severe injuries to his legs and back, but the doctors were optimistic about his chances for recovery. The flight home felt endless. Sarah stared out the airplane window, watching clouds drift past while her mind raced between worry for her father and confusion about her sudden departure from what should have been the celebration of a lifetime. Fellow passengers recognized her from news coverage of her victory, but she barely acknowledged their congratulations, too consumed with fear and exhaustion to engage in conversation. When she finally arrived home, Sarah's small town had transformed into something resembling a media circus. News vans lined Main Street, reporters interviewed anyone willing to speak about the local swimming sensation, and social media was flooded with support messages from around the country. The mayor had even declared it Sarah Mitchell Day and planned a celebration parade for the following weekend. But Sarah's focus remained entirely on her father's condition. She spent hours on the phone with military hospitals, trying to get updates on his surgery and recovery. The doctors in Germany reported that while Captain Mitchell was stable, he would need multiple operations and months of rehabilitation. The family's medical insurance would cover most expenses, but the emotional toll was devastating. 3 days after her return, Sarah was working her usual shift at Murphy's Diner, trying to maintain some normalcy while dealing with her father's situation. The small restaurant had become an unofficial headquarters for well-wishers and reporters, much to the owner's delight and Sarah's discomfort. She was refilling coffee cups and taking orders when Mrs., the town's longtime postmistress, approached her table with an unusual expression. "Sarah, dear, there's something you need to know," Mrs. said quietly, glancing around nervously. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but there are people asking questions about your swimming times, official-looking people with badges and paperwork." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What kind of questions?" Mrs. leaned closer, lowering her voice to barely above a whisper. "They're saying someone filed a formal complaint about your race time. Something about it being impossible for someone from a small town with limited training facilities to break a national record by such a large margin. They think you might have used performance-enhancing drugs." The coffee pot slipped from Sarah's hands, crashing to the floor and splattering hot liquid across the linoleum. Other diners turned to look, but Sarah barely noticed. The accusation hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making her legs feel weak. She had never even taken an aspirin during training, let alone anything that could enhance her performance. That afternoon, Sarah received an official letter from the National Swimming Federation. The document, written in cold legal language, informed her that her victory was under investigation pending the results of additional drug testing. All athletes were tested immediately after competition, and Sarah's initial test had come back clean, but someone had formally challenged the results and demanded more comprehensive testing. The letter was signed by Judge Harold, chairman of the Federation's Ethics Committee and a former Olympic swimmer himself. Sarah researched him online and discovered he had a reputation for being extremely strict about maintaining the integrity of competitive swimming. He had overseen several high-profile doping cases and had never been afraid to strip athletes of their achievements when evidence warranted such action. Mrs. Henderson arrived at Sarah's house that evening, her face grave with concern. She had received a similar letter requesting detailed information about Sarah's training regimen, diet, and any supplements or medications she had taken over the past year. The investigation would be thorough and invasive, examining every aspect of Sarah's preparation for the championships. "This is ridiculous," Mrs. Henderson said, packing around Sarah's living room. "I've been with you every day for 3 years. I know exactly what you've eaten, what you've trained, how hard you've worked. There's nothing illegal or artificial about your success." Sarah sat on the couch, staring at the official documents spread across the coffee table. The investigation would take several weeks to complete, during which time her medal and record would be held in suspension. Worse yet, the accusations had already leaked to the media, and news outlets were beginning to question whether her incredible performance had been too good to be true. The next morning brought a new wave of unwelcome attention. Reporters who had previously celebrated Sarah's achievement now asked pointed questions about her training methods and whether she had received any assistance in achieving her record-breaking time. The town's enthusiasm for their local hero began to cool as doubt crept into conversations and social media posts. Sarah's mother, already overwhelmed with worry about her husband's condition, struggled to cope with the additional stress of defending her daughter's reputation. Phone calls from reporters became constant, and protesters began gathering outside their modest home, some supporting Sarah and others demanding she surrender her medal immediately pending the investigation's outcome. The worst moment came during a live television interview that Sarah had agreed to give, hopping to defend herself publicly. The reporter, a sharp-dressed woman from a national sports network, started with sympathetic questions about Sarah's father's condition, but quickly shifted to aggressive inquiries about performance enhancement. Despite Sarah's honest answers and obvious emotional distress, the interviewer pressed harder, suggesting that her dramatic improvement suggested chemical assistance. Sarah broke down during the interview, tears streaming down her face as she tried to explain that her success came from years of dedication and sacrifice, not from drugs. The image of her crying on national television became a defining moment in the controversy, with some viewers seeing a wrongly accused young woman and others perceiving guilt and deception. That night, alone in her room, Sarah looked at the gold medal sitting on her dresser and wondered if she would ever be allowed to keep it. The investigation was moving slowly, with experts analyzing everything from her stroke technique to her physiological development over the past 3 years. Meanwhile, her father remained hospitalized overseas, unable to provide the emotional support she desperately needed. The phone rang again, another reporter seeking comment, but Sarah let it go to voicemail. She was tired of defending herself, tired of explaining her training methods, and tired of being treated like a criminal for achieving something extraordinary through honest hard work. As she prepared for bed, Sarah had no idea that the situation was about to become much more serious, and that judge was preparing to make a decision that would shock the entire swimming community. 2 weeks into the investigation, Judge Harold made an unprecedented decision that sent shockwaves through the swimming community and beyond. Without waiting for the complete results of the additional testing, he called for an emergency hearing at the National Swimming Federation headquarters in Colorado Springs. Sarah received 48 hours' notice to appear before a panel of officials to defend her championship victory. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in a sterile conference room that felt more like a courtroom than a sports facility. Sarah sat at a small table with Mrs. Henderson and a lawyer her mother had hastily hired using money borrowed from relatives. Across from them, Judge presided over a panel of 5 officials, all wearing serious expressions that suggested they had already reached their conclusions. The room was packed with media representatives, swimming officials, and curious onlookers who had traveled from across the country to witness what many considered a travesty of justice. Sarah's supporters had organized a peaceful demonstration outside the building, holding signs that read, "Believe in Sarah," and "Hard work isn't cheating," but their voices felt distant and ineffective against the formal proceedings inside. Judge opened the hearing by reading a prepared statement that outlined the Federation's concerns about Sarah's dramatic performance improvement. He cited statistical analysis showing that her time improvement was beyond what experts considered naturally possible, even accounting for optimal conditions and superior technique. His voice was clinical and detached, treating Sarah's achievement as nothing more than numbers on a spreadsheet. "Miss Mitchell," Judge said, adjusting his reading glasses and staring directly at Sarah, "the evidence suggests that your performance at the national championships was enhanced by artificial means. While your initial drug test came back negative, we have reason to believe that sophisticated masking agents may have been employed to hide banned substances." Sarah's lawyer immediately objected, pointing out that no evidence of masking agents had been found and that the additional testing had also come back completely clean. But Judge dismissed these arguments, suggesting that current testing methods were not sophisticated enough to detect the most advanced performance-enhancing techniques. The hearing continued for 3 hours, with expert witnesses testifying about the statistical improbability of Sarah's performance. They analyzed video footage of her technique, questioned her training methods, and scrutinized every aspect of her preparation. Sarah felt like a specimen under a microscope, her life's work reduced to data points and probability calculations. When Sarah was finally allowed to speak on her own behalf, her voice was steady despite the trembling in her hands. She described her training regimen in detail, explaining how she had worked with limited resources but unlimited determination. She talked about swimming in an outdoor pool during winter months, using a snorkel to practice breathing techniques, and running miles along country roads to build cardiovascular endurance. "I understand that my improvement seems dramatic," Sarah said, looking directly at Judge, "but I've been training for this my entire life. Every morning for 3 years, I've been in that pool before sunrise. Every weekend, I've sacrificed social activities to focus on my swimming. My success isn't mysterious or artificial. It's the result of dedication that most people aren't willing to commit to." Judge listened impassively, occasionally making notes but showing no sign of being moved by Sarah's testimony. When she finished speaking, he announced that the panel would deliberate for 30 minutes before rendering their decision. The brief recess felt like an eternity, with Sarah's supporters clustering around her while reporters speculated about the likely outcome. When the panel reconvened, Judge's expression was grim and determined. He stood to deliver the verdict, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "After careful consideration of all evidence presented, this panel finds that Miss Sarah Mitchell's performance at the National Swimming Championships was inconsistent with natural human capability given her training background and resources." The room erupted in gasps and angry shouts from Sarah's supporters, but Judge continued without pause. "Therefore, we are hereby stripping Miss Mitchell of her national championship title and record. She is required to surrender her gold medal immediately and is banned from competitive swimming for a period of 2 years pending further investigation." Sarah felt the world collapse around her. The gold medal, which had represented the culmination of years of sacrifice and dedication, suddenly felt like a lead weight around her neck. With shaking hands, she removed it and placed it on the table in front of Judge, tears streaming down her face as flashbulbs exploded around the room. Mrs. Henderson was crying openly, her hands clutched tightly in her lap as she watched her star athlete's dreams destroyed by bureaucratic suspicion. Sarah's lawyer immediately announced plans to appeal the decision, but Judge made it clear that the ruling was final and would be enforced immediately. As Sarah stood to leave the hearing room, still in shock from the devastating verdict, she noticed a commotion at the back of the room. Security guards were trying to prevent someone from entering, but their efforts proved futile. The heavy conference room doors swung open with a bang that silenced the entire assembly. A man in military dress uniform stepped into the room, his presence commanding immediate attention from everyone present. He was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and multiple medals adorning his chest, including what appeared to be the Navy Cross and Silver Star. His bearing was unmistakably that of a senior military officer, someone accustomed to respect and authority. The newcomer's eyes swept across the room before settling on Judge with a gaze that could have melted steel. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded thousands of troops in life-or-death situations. "Judge, I am Admiral James, United States Navy, and I believe you have made a serious error in judgment." The room fell completely silent, the weight of the Admiral's presence creating an atmosphere unlike anything anyone had experienced in a swimming federation hearing. Even Judge seemed momentarily unsettled by the unexpected interruption, his confident demeanor faltering for the first time during the proceedings. Admiral walked slowly down the center aisle, his polished shoes clicking against the linoleum floor with military precision. Every eye in the room followed his movement as he approached the panel's table, his expression growing more stern with each step. "What you have done here today," the Admiral continued, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed room, "is not justice. It is the persecution of an innocent young woman whose only crime was achieving excellence through honest hard work and dedication." Sarah stared at the Admiral in confusion, having no idea who he was or why he had appeared at this critical moment. But something about his presence filled her with a hope she hadn't felt since this nightmare began, as if a guardian angel had suddenly materialized to defend her honor. Admiral approached the panel table with measured steps, his presence transforming the atmosphere from one of bureaucratic proceeding to military tribunal. Judge attempted to maintain his authority, rising from his chair and demanding to know by what right a military officer was interfering in a civilian sports matter. "I'll tell you exactly by what right," Admiral replied, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "I have been monitoring this case because it involves the daughter of one of my finest officers, Captain Robert Mitchell, who is currently recovering from injuries sustained while serving his country in Afghanistan." Sarah's eyes widened in recognition. Admiral was her father's commanding officer, the man Captain Mitchell had spoken about with such deep respect during their video calls. She had seen his photograph in her father's military materials, but had never met him in person. The Admiral reached into his uniform jacket and a thick manila folder, placing it deliberately on the table before Judge. "What you have here, Judge, is not a case of performance enhancement, but a case of genetic excellence combined with extraordinary dedication. Allow me to present evidence that your committee apparently failed to investigate thoroughly." Judge's face was flushing red with indignation, but the Admiral's commanding presence made it difficult for him to interrupt. Several panel members leaned forward, curious about what new information was about to be revealed. "Sarah Mitchell," Admiral continued, "is not just any 19-year-old swimmer. She is the daughter of Captain Robert Mitchell, but more importantly, she is the granddaughter of Commander William, who represented the United States in the 1968 Olympics in swimming before joining the Navy SEALs." The room buzzed with surprised murmurs. Sarah herself had known her grandfather was a swimmer, but her father had never mentioned Olympic competition. Commander had died when Sarah was very young, and family stories about his athletic achievements had been overshadowed by tales of his military heroism. Admiral opened the folder and began displaying documents and photographs. Commander held 3 NCAA records during his college career and was considered a lock for Olympic gold, until a training accident sidelined him just weeks before the Games. His times from 1967 would still be competitive today, 57 years later. Judge examined the documents skeptically, but the authentication was undeniable. Official Olympic Committee records, NCAA swimming archives, and military personnel files all confirmed Admiral's claims about Sarah's grandfather's extraordinary swimming abilities. Furthermore, the Admiral continued, genetic testing performed by military medical personnel during Captain Mitchell's current treatment revealed markers associated with exceptional athletic performance. These same markers were identified in Sarah during routine medical screening when she applied for a military academy prep program last year. Sarah remembered the medical examination, but had never been told about any genetic findings. Admiral explained that certain genetic combinations, while extremely rare, could produce individuals with exceptional cardiovascular efficiency, muscle fiber distribution, and lactic acid processing capabilities. "What you witnessed at the national championships," Admiral said directly to Judge, "was not cheating. It was the emergence of genetic potential that had been carefully developed through years of dedicated training under difficult circumstances. Sarah's improvement was dramatic because she finally competed in optimal conditions that allowed her natural abilities to fully express themselves." The Admiral presented additional evidence, including training videos that Mrs. Henderson had recorded over 3 years, showing Sarah's gradual but steady improvement. Medical experts who had analyzed the footage confirmed that her technique development and physical conditioning were consistent with natural progression, not artificial enhancement. Doctor, a sports physiologist whom Admiral had brought as an expert witness, explained how genetic factors could remain dormant until triggered by optimal training conditions and competition environment. Miss Mitchell's performance is extraordinary but not impossible, Doctor. Her genetic profile, combined with her training dedication, created perfect conditions for breakthrough performance. Judge's composure was cracking under the weight of evidence that directly contradicted his committee's findings. Several panel members were now questioning their earlier decision, whispering among themselves and reviewing the new documentation. Admiral then delivered what would become the defining moment of the entire controversy. He turned to address not just the panel, but the entire room, his voice carrying the moral authority of someone who had dedicated his life to defending justice and honor. Ladies, I have spent 35 years in military service, leading men and women who risk their lives to protect the freedoms we enjoy in this country. I have seen genuine heroes and I have seen frauds. Sarah Mitchell is no fraud. She is a young woman who embodies everything we claim to value: hard work, dedication, perseverance, and achieving excellence against all odds. The Admiral's voice grew stronger as he continued. Her father is lying in a military hospital, recovering from injuries sustained while serving his country. He should be celebrating his daughter's achievement, not worrying about whether bureaucratic incompetence will rob her of recognition she has honestly earned. Judge made one final attempt to maintain his position, arguing that statistical analysis still suggested Sarah's performance was beyond natural capability. But Admiral was ready for this objection. Judge, your statistical analysis assumes that all athletes have equal genetic potential and equal access to training resources. Sarah had neither elite genetic inheritance nor elite training facilities, but she maximized both through extraordinary effort. Statistics cannot measure the human heart, the power of determination, or the strength that comes from honoring one's family and country. The room erupted in sustained applause as Admiral concluded his defense of Sarah's character and achievements. Even some of the panel members joined the ovation, clearly moved by the compelling evidence and passionate advocacy. Judge was left with no choice but to call for an immediate recess to allow the panel to reconsider their decision in light of the new evidence. During the 30-minute break, media representatives frantically updated their stories, while Sarah's supporters celebrated what appeared to be a complete vindication. When the panel reconvened, Judge's demeanor had changed completely. Speaking in a subdued tone, he announced that all charges against Sarah Mitchell were being dropped and her championship title was being fully reinstated. Her gold medal was returned to her with an official apology from the National Swimming Federation. Sarah accepted her medal with tears of relief and gratitude, but her thoughts remained with her father, still recovering in a hospital thousands of miles away. Admiral approached her afterward, explaining that Captain Mitchell had contacted him when he learned about the investigation, asking his commanding officer to ensure his daughter received fair treatment. 3 months later, Captain Mitchell returned home to a hero's welcome that included both his military service and his daughter's swimming achievement. Sarah went on to compete in international competitions, eventually earning a spot on the Olympic team, where she honored both her grandfather's legacy and her father's sacrifice. Admiral attended Sarah's Olympic competition, watching from the stands as she won 2 gold medals and set a new world record. After the ceremony, Sarah found him in the crowd and presented him with one of her medals, thanking him for defending her honor when she couldn't defend herself. The story became legendary in both military and swimming circles, cited as an example of how true leadership means protecting those who cannot protect themselves and ensuring that excellence is recognized regardless of its humble origins. Sarah's medals now rest in a display case alongside her grandfather's military decorations and her father's service awards, representing 3 generations of American excellence achieved through dedication, sacrifice, and unwavering integrity.